Welcome to the WellWaveNOW show. Today we are doing the backstory of Dr. Josie Tenore, an MD, also a Harvard graduate with a master's degree, and we're going to hear more about her educational background and what brought her to where she is today. But even before we get to her professional career, we want to learn more about you, Dr. Josie, and where you grew up. Where did you come from?
So I was born in Italy in a small town. And my mother realized very early that there was not a lot of opportunity for two daughters in a small town. And she worked very hard to get sponsorship. And we ended up in Toronto, Canada when I was 4 years old.
Wow, so I probably really mispronounced or really Americanized your last name, Tenor. How would I actually say that in Italian?
Canode.
Ah, yeah, beautiful. Way more beautiful than how I said it. So, well, thanks, Dr. Josie. Appreciate you being here with us today, and it's great to get to know you a little better. So, you mentioned you have one sister. Do you have other siblings as well?
I have one older sister, 7.5 years older than I am, not
Okay,
in healthcare.
and not in healthcare. Okay, excellent. And what was that like growing up, with your family? Was she because of that age gap, was she a nurturer? Was she a teaser? How was your childhood?
She was a second mom. Both my parents worked two jobs in order to, make ends meet. So she was the more of a maternal figure. So she was straddled with the responsibility of looking after myself and my cousin. And so, it was a lot of pressure for her. And I mean, as as consistently true about most immigrants, as soon as she could get a job and work and, sort of say she's 16 when she was really 14 because she looked 16, she was out there. And so then I took over being the individual who prepared meals and looked after the house and did all of that sort of stuff. Nowadays that it would be called child labor and it's not, it's against the law. But as a kid growing up, it was a necessity. If I didn't make the meal, we would not eat until midnight. So
Wow. Wow. So how old were you when you moved to Canada?
four.
Four. Wow. So I moved to Canada, the western side, when I was the ripe old age of three.
Ah,
But my parents were both from Arizona, so it was way too cold up there. We only lasted about 8.5 years and then had to move back to the States. Did your family stay up there a lot longer?
they did. My dad was discouraged a little bit about the weather, and he was all set to head back to Italy. And then he got a job, like a really good job, and he was well cared for by his employer for, the duration of his life. And so he stayed. But
Wow.
it was a little bit colder than, the area of Naples. Naples is a little bit warmer.
Yeah. They're not growing oranges in Toronto, that's for sure.
No, no. Popsicles, perhaps. Icicles, yes, but not oranges, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So are there any family traditions, given that family upbringing and staying there together and coming together as immigrants in a new country? Are there any traditions you've kind of kept from Italy or that you're still doing today that you brought down to the US or
I,
any new
I would,
traditions you created?
yeah, I would have loved to have kept the tradition of having an organic garden. I grew up eating out of the garden my whole childhood. So, when I went and I have stories of my mother and her sisters. So two other sisters lived in Toronto, and I have stories of them going to a chicken farm and buying 200 live chickens and bringing them to the house and proceeding to slaughter them in the basement so we had fresh meat. And when I went off to college, like the first time I bought chicken, I'm like, what is this? Like it's yellow and slimy, and what's this thing on the bottom of the chicken that looks like it's even more slime? So it was a bit of a shock, and I ended up being a vegetarian in college because I just couldn't get my head wrapped around what people purchased in grocery stores that they considered protein. So
Now, did you get involved in the chicken slaughtering over time and the plucking of the chickens at all?
oh, I had to pluck them, and I had to sort of roast the little remaining feathers over the stove. But my sister was much more involved. I ran. Like to me, it was like I can't. My friends I would have been the laughing stock of the school had they known what was happening in the family home. But
Oh, so
we always had fresh food. I have to tell you, everybody always liked to come to my house to eat.
Did you
it's
introduce any, Italian dishes to your Canadian friends?
Oh, yes. I mean, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, and initially, as a kid, you always think you're in trouble when other kids' parents would say things, and yeah, I'd get the how did you get my children to eat vegetables? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. They just like come over and I pick them from the garden and then I make a salad and they want to eat it. So yes. And the next thing you know, like my parents are going over and teaching them how to plant garlic and then how to like dig up another plot and add some vegetables. And so we started a little bit of a trend in my neighborhood with people growing vegetables and fruit.
Was there access to the ingredients and things that your parents were used to, or did you have to order them in? That was our experience moving to, British Columbia, Canada. There weren't certain things that my mom was used to cooking with. She did a lot of, she did her practicum down in Guatemala, so she did
Mm.
a lot of Mexican dishes, but you couldn't get even, mace or corn flour or anything like that in BC back in the day.
So the interesting thing about Toronto is that there was a mass exodus out of southern Italy because the opportunities for people in the south were not great. And
Okay.
so the Italian community in Toronto was huge. And so Little Italy was actually Big Italy. And there were, there was stores that had snails crawling on wicker baskets and, all of the any item you wanted, any ingredient was there. And Greektown was also huge. So there's a lot of similarities between ingredients. So, when we wanted fresh figs in September, we would go to Greektown and you'd buy them by like the case. And they were, imported that day. So they were pretty fresh. And the seafood was imported from Greece that day. So we really did not have any issues getting ingredients.
Okay, well, and we're in an actual big city. We
Yeah.
were in a little tiny dot on the map in this, absolute center of the province too. So I mean, had we been down in Vancouver area, I'm sure those ingredients would have been available, but not
Yeah.
up in the little what my older sister called Hooterville, which of course is a reference to the Green Acres, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would have
So
been better off in Okanagan Valley that was semi-temperate.
oh, yeah, yeah. We loved visiting there and getting
Yeah.
fresh fruit right
Yeah.
from the tree. Did you
Yeah.
play any sports or did you have a musical instrument? What did you do growing up as a extracurricular?
So, I was lucky I had a very balanced public education because that's another human right in Canada. And so we did have to do music and the rest of it. So my first venture was violin and that did not go over well in my family because the does. So I ended up playing clarinet in the band. And I stayed playing clarinet until I finished high school. And then, once I hit college, I was like so focused, or in Canada, we call it university. I was very focused on trying to get into medical school, so I didn't continue with my music at that point. And I probably can't read music now. I would have to have a refresher. I mean, I was always active, so cycling, I didn't play group sports, but my bike was my vehicle for the longest time. So I got around even when in med school, I went from hospital to hospital on a bicycle. So that always prompted some discussion as I came flying in the ER to deliver a baby. But
So
yeah.
kind of moving into that work world a little bit. But I noticed when you said when you got left high school, got to university, you were already focused on getting into med school. So did you always know that you wanted to be a healer, be a physician?
Since I was 5.
Fine. Okay. And can you remember either who or what influenced you the most for that, or in any other part of your life?
I was hospitalized with a kidney infection. And I came out and I apparently pointed to each arm and I said, they took blood here and they take blood here. I want to be a doctor. And that was it. And then, of course, I talked too much. And if I had any other interest, I couldn't possibly pivot because I had already announced to the world this is what I was going to do. And so luckily, I had a very supportive father because that was unusual in my culture for women to have careers. So he was like, you're smart enough. You can do whatever you want to do. Just go and just do it. So I didn't really have any pushback in terms of I was female and therefore I was not capable to do medicine. So I was lucky in that regard.
Was it in medical school that you decided which path to go, or did you know ahead of time and you already were telling your professors, this is the route I'm going?
Well, and it was more like, wow, I don't want to give up kids. Wow, I don't want to give up OB. Wow, I don't want to give up, older people. So I ended up in family medicine because I was able to do everything from, helping the sperm find the egg look after pregnant women, deliver their babies, immunize their kids, deal with adolescent turmoil, couples counseling. I did along the way get a degree, 98.2% of a master's in psychology, actually from the University of Chicago, because I got landed with a friend of mine was leaving his residency and said, I'm sending you, 15 psychotherapy patients. And I panicked. I'm like, I don't know anything about psychotherapy. And he's like, you have common sense, you'll be fine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. So I actually did most of the degree in psychology through the University of Chicago.
Yeah. See,
Didn't,
now I even like you even more. 'Cause man,
Yeah, I was going to say Tim probably has a little experience with an MBA in Chicago.
yeah,
there you
that's
go. Yeah.
very, very,
So the only thing I didn't do is the practicum because I'm like, I'm doing it every day. So I didn't actually finish and get degreed from it because I didn't think it was necessary. In hindsight, it would have been helpful when I moved to the US. In Canada, I could do psychotherapy if I felt that I was well trained, but
Mhm.
in the US, you have to be a psychologist. So, but it's still useful. I use a lot of psychology in my practice today, so I don't regret the decision that I made to do that program and not necessarily complete it.
yep, I
Yeah.
remember all those schools are, especially, sure, it's still that way today, but I'm sure, when you went through, and when I went through, all the programs were very, 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 very rigorous, and you really had to work to get through it. So
Mhm.
I applaud you for that. Now, taking all that, what would you say in all that you've done? You didn't want to give up this, you didn't want to give up that, you do all this. What's kind of the essence of your work now, and what do you personally get out of it?
So essentially the essence of what I do is transform lives. Yeah, that's sort of essentially the one-liner that I could use because people come to me either because their self-esteem is taking a hit and they feel they want something, cosmetically enhanced, but naturally. So I'm known for my natural work. Um, Whether it's that or I've gone to my doctor and they've checked me out and they tell me I'm fine and I don't feel good. And then if I can do my detective work and figure out what's really going on and help people feel better. And it's not unusual that I'll have patients come to me and give me huge hugs and like thank me for, making their life so wonderful and fulfilled and they feel good and they look good and they're, confident. That's really what moves me. And most of my friends are retired, and they're like, "When are you going to retire?" And I'm like, "Dad, when I'm dead, I'm not retiring." I mean, I still get a lot out of what I do. So and it's similar in the cosmetic or in the internal world. It's the same outcome.
Do you ever have a bad day? It seems like you're such an upbeat provider that I guess the question I'm getting to is if you come up against something that is a challenge, how do you get past that and keep that upbeat spirit that you have?
Yeah, I said I am a little bit of a whack-a-mole. Like my journey has had a lot of like ups and downs, and I can't explain it, but I somehow every once in a while I'll just not, I'll shut down a bit, be in my own space, read a trashy novel, some murder mystery, and then it recharge or go skiing for a long weekend. I come back, I recharge my batteries, and I go on. Like, but I do. I mean, I practice what I preach, so I work out, routinely. I eat healthy, take my supplements. So I think that that's important for resilience. But yeah, of course, I have a bad day. I'm not Pollyanna doesn't exist, so I have more than my share, and it's always disconcerting when somebody gets misinformation and they feel that they've been harmed, like a breast cancer diagnosis and somebody on hormones who is so afraid that they're not really receptive to the information about why it happened and how their outcomes are going to be better at the end of the day. And, those are the bad days, the ones that I can't, complete the task that I set out to do. But then I move on because somebody else comes in the door and needs my help and I can help them. And
Yeah.
so,
And we do want to get into some of those success stories on the full podcast. Do you have a dream project that you are thinking about? What's the next phase for you?
well, my dream project is really how do I reach more individuals? So one of the comments that I get and as soon as yesterday, actually, when I posed this to one of my patients, like, how would you feel about, me doing some sort of educational seminar or educational webinars for people that they can log into and learn about women's health. And they, the response has been like, fantastic. This is great. You really should do it. I mean, they want me to do it obviously in my office because it's convenient for them, but there's been some discussion about how so many individuals, especially women, don't know where to go to get information that's already been vetted. And so my bigger project is to figure out a way to get to more people and more women, and how to do that without, compromising what I'm currently doing. So that's always the challenge.
All right, Tim, are we ready for the personal preferences, fun facts, rapid fire?
So here we are, there's three things, just want to, whatever comes to mind for you first on this. So are you more of an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl.
Okay. Do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
Okay. And do you prefer coffee, tea, or something else?
And occasionally a Prosecco if it's after 5 o'clock, or champagne, really, but that's a little highbrow.
Okay, so until we got to what you imbibe, you are just right there. Then you're kind of widespread on what you imbibe and what you like. That's all right.
Well, that's awesome. We're looking forward to having you on the full podcast, and remind our viewers we are live every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's 1 p.m. Pacific, and we look forward to getting more into depth with you, Dr. Josie. Thank you so much for being our guest today, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate it.